And we kick things off tonight with reaction to some disturbing comments that are being attributed to Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy. Now, they appeared in today's New York Times and were made by Bundy, what the paper likened to a town hall meeting with supporters. Now, audio was recently posted of the alleged remarks online. Take a listen.
I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro.
Now, Bundy then reportedly recalled driving past a public housing project in North Las Vegas, and he continued by saying this.
In front of that government house, the door was usually open, and the older people and the kids, and there's always at least a half a dozen people sitting on the porch. They didn't have nothing to do. They didn't have nothing for their kids to do. They didn't have nothing for their young girls to do. And because they were basically on government subsidy, and so now what do? They abort their young children. They put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. And I've often wondered, are they better off as slaves picking cotton, having family life and doing things, or are they better off under government subsidy?
All right, allow me to make myself abundantly clear. I believe those comments are downright racist, they are repugnant, they are bigoted, and it's beyond disturbing. I find those comments to be deplorable, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that Cliven Bundy holds those views. Now, while I supported the Bundy Ranch as they took a stand against the Bureau of Land Management, I was absolutely dismayed and frankly disappointed after reading the article and then hearing the commentary. However, I also want to say this. The ranch standoff that took place out in Nevada was not about a man named Cliven Bundy. At the heart of this issue was my belief that our government is simply out of control. Now, to me, this was about a federal agency's dangerous response to a situation that could have resulted in a catastrophe, and that means people dying and people being shot, kind of comparable to what we saw in Waco, Texas. It was about hundreds of armed federal agents and snipers and sharpshooters surrounding a family, and not because that family posed a threat to anyone else, but because their cattle happened to be grazing on the wrong patch of grass and they were eating government grass. In other words, when I believe government officials, when they overstep their line, I think it's my job to call them on it, and make no mistake about it, I'll continue to do just that. Because long before the mainstream media paid any attention to Cliven Bundy and his ranch, we on this program were focusing on similar issues like eminent domain for many, many years. Now, after all, these stories serve as proof that we have a government gone wild today in America. Now, we reminded you about some of them last night. This is government gone wild. It's not limited to Cliven Bundy or to a California Valley or eminent domain stories. Now, in recent years, we have seen it play out in a vindictive tax agency's efforts to target and silence and intimidate citizens who happen to think this country is headed in the wrong direction. We watched tragically as our top diplomats and our commander-in-chief lied in the wake of a terrorist attack that took the lives of 4 brave Americans. We've also endured the universal nightmare that is Obamacare. Premiums have, in fact, increased in spite of promises to the contrary. Plans have been canceled in spite of promises to the contrary. And now a federal agency is telling you what doctors you can and cannot see when you were promised the exact opposite. In my opinion, Obamacare is the gold standard of government gone wild. But you won't read the truth about the stories that I mentioned tonight in places like the New York Times. Why? Because that paper has actively helped cover up what really happened in the aftermath of Benghazi. Its reporters don't have the time or the energy to stand with average Americans being victimized by eminent domain. By the way, the same goes for my good friend, funny man, Jon Stewart. He's far too busy yucking it up on The Daily Show with his famous friends, and he simply lacks the moral courage to speak truth to power, even when he's looking it right in the eye. And for the man who arrived in Washington, lecturing the entire world on hope and change, well, I think it's official. All hope is lost when it comes to President Barack Obama and his ability to stand for what's right. Now, this is how his government is out of control. And that's something we will never ignore here on this program, and that's a promise I make to you. Now, when we return, radio host David Webb, he's in studio with reaction to all of this. And coming up next, Cliven Bundy attempted to clarify those racist remarks earlier today. We have audio of that sound as Hannity continues. Welcome back to Hannity. Now, earlier we told you about the disgraceful comments made by rancher Cliven Bundy. Now, Cliven addressed those racist remarks during a press conference today. Take a look.
I don't think they was happy with their government subsidy home, they sort of looked to me like they were slaves. And you know, I thought, would they be happier if they was home with their, in talking about the South, where they come from? They come to Las Vegas for something better. But would have they been happier at home with their gardens and their chickens and their children playing around them and their family having work to do? Would they? That was the question I asked, and I ask you, would they be happier?
Joining me now with reaction in studio, radio talk show host, and by the way, you fill in on this show. Our good friend David Webb is here. How are you? You remember with Todd Aiken? Yeah. Remember anybody? Every election, going back to '98, Radio Ad, Missouri, if you elect the Republicans, black churches are going to burn, the NAACP ad in 2000, these narratives that liberals want. It infuriates me that conservatives are racist. Todd Aiken makes a dumb comment. Everybody running in his party has to answer it. I try to force him out. So here, those of us, we agreed on this issue that you didn't need 200 agents, armed, snipers, drawing in people for a conflict, that the government was best to put a lien on the property. Now you find out Cliven Bundy says this. Now you got the smear. Oh, these people must support those views.
And this becomes the story.
This
becomes the story. Look,
I'm really pissed off about it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right up front. First, let me say, Sean, I've known you a long time. We're good friends. This is one of the best packages I've ever seen you and this staff put together.
Thank you.
This is an amazing track record of showing the difference between government overreach. Conservatives need to stop getting into the wrong arguments. I covered this story on my show, but I dealt with it from the government overreach point of view. It was Cliven Bundy might have been the central point because it's the land issue, but that wasn't the real issue. The bigger issue is bigger than him. It's government gone wild. It's deplorable. I'll go back to what you said. It is racist what he said, and that he goes back and supports it proves that he's an idiot. And I'll call it what it is. But that now becomes the narrative instead of the story of government gone wild, government that is now taking land when it can. And there's a bigger issue in the West, which I've talked to people out there about, where the BLM, which has been around long before Cliven Bundy and this issue since '93, they may not have been around since his family, but they've been around longer than President Obama, longer than other presidents. They've been in the business of taking and confiscating land. The states need to have more control of this. And I've asked this issue of state legislators on air and off air, why weren't the states more involved with Bundy and others before this?
The government overreach, again, there are different cases. We're talking about eminent domain. Why are they attacking veterans in their homes for 46 years, or a guy with lung cancer that's told he has 2 years to live? Or the case in Riviera Beach down in Florida.
Or the Delta smelt when you went out there with Rodriguez.
Or in the case when we went down after Katrina to New Orleans. It's the same thing. This happens all the time, and in every case, these people are left alone to fight the government. They don't have the money for the lawyers, and they end up making horrible deals like a Colorado couple we had on the air this week. They had to give up their beautiful cabin because the government needed more open space.
Right. And until you go in with the media, until the power of the press and the power of the people comes into play, it doesn't become a big story in government. And all those examples you played, government finally backed off.
You agreed. There was government overreach. We didn't need dogs and stun guns and snipers and sharpshooters.
$966,000 to some ranching outfit out of Utah to come in and round up a few cows and kill them. This is the problem. Deal with the issue, which is government overreach. Yeah. Cliven Bundy just ruined it, frankly. What would have been a good argument against the federal government, we now have to refight and relitigate.
All right. Well said. David, always good to see you, bud.